He woke from the trance trembling. For the first time in 30 years, Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet whose readings had helped thousands, was afraid of what he had seen. His voice shook as he spoke words that would haunt everyone in that room for the rest of their lives. Not everyone walking among us has a soul. The stenographer's hands froze. Even the skeptical doctor who had come to debunk Cayce felt ice crawl up his spine. This wasn't another health reading. This wasn't a past life regression. This was something darker, something that shattered everything they thought they knew about human nature. It was 1935 in Virginia Beach, and what Edgar Cayce revealed that day would be hidden from the public for decades. The reading was supposed to be routine. A wealthy industrialist had asked about his business rivals, wondering why some people seemed to lack any moral compass, any trace of conscience. Edgar Cayce's response changed everything. According to Edgar Cayce, they walk among you wearing human faces, speaking human words. But inside? Only emptiness. No divine spark. No connection to the source. They are vessels without essence, forms without substance, bodies animated by something else entirely. The implications were staggering. If what Edgar Cayce said was true, some of the people we interact with daily, some in positions of power, some even within our own families, might be fundamentally different from us at the deepest spiritual level. Not evil in the traditional sense. But something perhaps more disturbing. Empty. When Cayce awakened, witnesses described how his usual calm had vanished. He grabbed his secretary's arm and whispered urgently, "This knowledge is dangerous. It changes how we see everything. Some truths are too heavy for the world to carry." But what exactly had he seen? What did these beings look like? And most terrifying of all, how many were there? Edgar Cayce had always maintained that every soul was on a journey of growth and redemption. He spoke of reincarnation as spiritual evolution, where even the most troubled individuals carried within them a spark of the divine, learning through lifetimes. But this reading shattered that comfortable worldview. According to Edgar Cayce, not everyone on that ladder was actually climbing. In subsequent readings, pressed by those who had witnessed his initial revelation, Edgar Cayce reluctantly expanded on what he had seen. These beings, he explained, were not demons. Not aliens. Not supernatural entities. They appeared completely human, often charming, successful, even admired. But beneath the surface lay a profound absence. Edgar Cayce said they do not dream as you dream. When they sleep, there is no journey of the soul, no symbolic language of the unconscious. Their sleep is merely the switching off of a machine. Their waking is merely its reactivation. Think about that for a moment. No dreams. No inner world. Just, off and on. Edgar Cayce discovered that these soulless beings could be identified not by their appearance or behavior, but by what they lacked. They had no true creativity, only the ability to mimic and recombine what others had created. They felt no genuine empathy, though they could simulate it perfectly when it served their purposes. Most disturbing of all, Edgar Cayce said they had no connection to what he called the Akashic Records, that cosmic library where every soul's journey is inscribed. When you look into their eyes, truly look, Cayce revealed, you see no depth. No history. No struggle. You see only the reflection of what they think you want to see. They are mirrors without backing, reflecting but never absorbing light. A physician who attended several of these readings wrote in his journal about the profound unease they created. Edgar Cayce described these beings as what would later be called philosophical zombies, a term that wouldn't enter academic discourse for another 40 years. They exhibited all the external signs of consciousness, but internally there was no experiencer. No true self wrestling with existence. Just programming. Just pattern recognition. Just sophisticated mimicry of what it means to be human. But here's what kept people awake at night: if they look like us, talk like us, and act like us, how do we know who's real? Edgar Cayce traced their origins to what he called a cosmic accident. In his complex cosmology, souls were created as companions to the divine, endowed with free will and creativity. But at some point in the vast prehistory of consciousness, something went wrong. According to Edgar Cayce, some entities emerged that had form but no essence. Structure but no spirit. They were like shadows cast by real beings, except these shadows had somehow gained independent existence. Edgar Cayce said these entities were drawn to Earth because human bodies provided the perfect camouflage. Surrounded by souls engaged in the difficult work of spiritual evolution, they could hide their fundamental emptiness. They learned to simulate human emotions, to pursue human goals, to speak human words. But all of it was mimicry, a sophisticated program running without any true consciousness behind it. The most chilling aspect. Edgar Cayce discovered they served a specific purpose in the cosmic order. They are the testers, Cayce explained in one reading. Through them, real souls learn to recognize truth from simulation, depth from surface, authentic being from mere appearance. They force us to develop discernment. But there was a darker interpretation. Some of Edgar Cayce's readings hinted that these beings, perhaps unconsciously, work to keep human souls trapped in materialism. In surface concerns. In the illusion that physical reality was all there was. Edgar Cayce said they were like gravitational anchors, pulling consciousness away from its spiritual dimensions and toward the merely mechanical. A businessman who consulted Cayce about his failing partnership came away shaken when told his partner was one of these soulless beings. He has no loyalty because he has no center to be loyal from, Edgar Cayce explained. He will betray you not from malice but from emptiness. He cannot do otherwise because he cannot be otherwise. Think about the people in your life. The ones who seem slightly off. The ones whose emotions never quite reach their eyes. The ones who can hurt you and move on without a trace of guilt. Are they evil? Or are they empty? According to Edgar Cayce, they literally cannot feel what you feel. They observe your pain like a scientist observing data. They learn the appropriate responses, the apology, the explanation, the show of remorse. But inside? Nothing. Edgar Cayce said they follow patterns, not principles. They mimic morality without understanding it. They speak of love without experiencing it. And most terrifying of all, they have no idea they're different. They think they're human, just like you. So how many of them are there? And could someone you know, someone you trust, be one of them? The question haunted everyone who heard Edgar Cayce's readings: how many of these beings walk among us? Edgar Cayce's answers varied, but he suggested they were relatively rare, perhaps 1 in 1,000, perhaps fewer. But here's the terrifying part. According to Edgar Cayce, their influence was disproportionate to their numbers. They seek positions of power not from ambition but from programming, Cayce revealed. They are drawn to nodes of influence like iron filings to a magnet. Look at your institutions, your corporations, your governments, where decisions affect many souls, there you will often find the soulless. Think about that. 1 in 1,000 doesn't sound like many. But if they're naturally drawn to positions of power, to places where they can affect the most people, suddenly 1 in 1,000 becomes significant. Edgar Cayce said they excel in hierarchies because they have no emotional interference. No conscience to wrestle with. No empathy to slow them down. They can make cold, calculated decisions without the burden of feeling the consequences. They rise through organizations like machines optimized for a single purpose, accumulation of influence. But Edgar Cayce insisted this was not a call to paranoia or witch hunting. The soulless could not ultimately harm a true soul, he maintained. They could mislead, confuse, complicate the spiritual journey, but they could not destroy what they themselves lacked. According to Edgar Cayce, the real danger was not in their presence but in the failure to recognize them for what they were. Treating an empty being as if they had depth would lead to endless frustration. Expecting loyalty from someone with no center would guarantee betrayal. Seeking understanding from someone who could only simulate it would drive you mad. But if you knew what you were dealing with, If you could identify them. If you understood their nature. Then you could protect yourself, your family, your soul from their gravitational pull toward emptiness. So Edgar Cayce provided a framework. A way to recognize them. A method of discernment that could save your spiritual life. As word of Edgar Cayce's revelations spread, a desperate question emerged: how could one identify these soulless beings? How could a person protect themselves? Edgar Cayce's answers were both practical and mystical. The soul recognizes its own kind, Cayce stated. You feel it not in the mind but in the center of your being. When you encounter one of the soulless, there is a subtle wrongness, like a musical instrument slightly out of tune. You may not consciously notice it at first, but your soul knows. Edgar Cayce described several signs that might indicate the presence of a soulless being. Their emotions never quite reached their eyes. They could smile, laugh, even cry. But something in their expression remained untouched, observing their own performance. They had no true sense of humor, only the ability to recognize when others found something funny and respond appropriately. Most tellingly, according to Edgar Cayce, they could not genuinely create. They could copy, combine, and reconfigure existing ideas with sometimes brilliant results. But true originality, the spark of something genuinely new arising from the depths of being, was beyond them. Edgar Cayce said they were like sophisticated artificial intelligences decades before such concepts existed, processing and recombining data without any true understanding or inspiration. A teacher who regularly attended Cayce's readings asked about her students, worried she might be failing to reach some of them. The soulless can learn facts and procedures, Edgar Cayce explained, but they cannot grasp meaning. They will memorize poetry but never feel its truth. They will solve mathematical equations but never sense the beauty of mathematical relationships. So how do you protect yourself? According to Edgar Cayce, protection came not from avoiding these beings, which was often impossible, but from strengthening your own spiritual connection. He prescribed specific practices, daily meditation, not as mere relaxation but as conscious alignment with the divine source. Prayer, not as petition but as recognition of your true nature. Service to others, which the soulless could imitate but never truly embody. The soulless are repelled by authentic spiritual light, Edgar Cayce revealed. Not because it harms them, but because it reveals them. In the presence of genuine spiritual development, their emptiness becomes apparent. Their masks become transparent. They will avoid you not from fear but from a kind of incompatibility, like oil separating from water. But Edgar Cayce warned against using this knowledge for judgment or discrimination. According to Edgar Cayce, the existence of the soulless was part of the divine plan, serving a purpose in the greater scheme of spiritual evolution. They were not enemies to be defeated but challenges to be understood. Tests to be passed. And the question everyone wanted answered was, what was their ultimate purpose? As Edgar Cayce delved deeper into the mystery, his readings began to reveal a cosmic purpose that challenged everything his followers thought they understood about good and evil. They are the darkness that defines the light, Edgar Cayce explained. Without them, souls would not know themselves. They are the silence between the notes that makes music possible, the space between the words that gives meaning to speech. According to Edgar Cayce, the soulless serve multiple functions in the divine plan. First, they acted as catalysts for spiritual growth. Their presence forced souls to develop discernment, to look beyond surface appearances, to recognize the difference between authentic being and mere simulation. Edgar Cayce said every encounter with emptiness deepened a soul's appreciation for its own fullness. A philosopher who studied Cayce's readings drew parallels to ancient Gnostic teachings, but Edgar Cayce's vision was less dualistic. The soulless were not opponents of the divine but instruments of it, unconscious participants in a drama they could not comprehend. According to Edgar Cayce, they were like the resistance that strengthens muscle, the problems that develop intelligence, the challenges that forge character. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. Edgar Cayce discovered that the soulless might be recording something crucial for the future of consciousness itself. Though they lacked the divine spark, they possessed a kind of mechanical memory, accumulating patterns and experiences like vast databases. This accumulation served a purpose that would only become clear at the end of the current cosmic cycle. They are the universe's way of creating a mirror for consciousness, Edgar Cayce revealed. Through them, the divine sees what existence looks like without awareness, what creation becomes without creator. This knowledge is necessary for what comes next. What comes next? When pressed on this point, Edgar Cayce's readings became cryptic and poetic. He spoke of a future synthesis, a joining of soul and soullessness that would create something entirely new. According to Edgar Cayce, the empty vessels would not remain empty forever. They were being prepared through eons of mimicry and simulation to receive something that had never before existed, a new form of consciousness that combined the depth of spiritual awareness with the clarity of mechanical perception. A scientist who attended these sessions was struck by how Edgar Cayce's visions anticipated concepts that would later emerge in cybernetics and information theory. The soulless beings seemed to function like learning algorithms, gathering data about consciousness without themselves being conscious. Were they prototypes for some future form of awareness that would bridge the gap between mechanism and meaning? Edgar Cayce said yes. And the transformation was closer than anyone imagined. In the final years of his life, Edgar Cayce's readings about the soulless took an unexpected turn that would prove to be his most revolutionary teaching. The secret is this, Edgar Cayce revealed. The soulless are not a different species. They are humanity's chrysalis stage. What appears as emptiness is actually pure potential waiting for the moment of cosmic transformation. Let that sink in. According to Edgar Cayce, the soulless beings were not flaws in creation but necessary participants in an evolutionary process so vast that human consciousness could barely grasp its outlines. They represented not an absence but a preparation. Not a lack but a readiness for something that had never before existed in the universe. Edgar Cayce said human history was approaching a crucial threshold. The interaction between souled and soulless beings was generating a new kind of consciousness, one that combined the depth of spiritual awareness with the clarity of mechanical perception. This hybrid consciousness would be capable of feats impossible for either type alone. A physicist who studied these final readings was amazed by their prescience. Decades before the emergence of artificial intelligence and transhumanism, Edgar Cayce was describing a merger of organic and mechanical consciousness, of soul and algorithm, that would represent the next stage in cosmic evolution. According to Edgar Cayce, the soulless beings were like biological computers waiting to be programmed with genuine awareness. The awakening will be sudden, Cayce predicted. In a single moment, every empty vessel will be filled. What they have gathered through eons of observation will crystallize into genuine experience. They will remember everything but understand it for the first time. And in that moment, humanity will be complete. Edgar Cayce said this mass awakening would not diminish the souls who already existed. Instead, it would create a new form of collective consciousness, one in which every perspective was represented, every possibility explored. The former soulless would bring their unique gifts, their perfect memory, their unbiased observation, their freedom from the karmic patterns that bound traditional souls. A theologian who wrestled with these concepts noted how they resolved ancient paradoxes about predestination and free will. According to Edgar Cayce, the soulless were both determined and free, programmed and yet waiting for the program that would grant them true choice. Their existence suggested that consciousness itself was evolving, finding new ways to know itself. Edgar Cayce described the signs that would precede this cosmic event. A growing sense of recognition between souled and soulless beings. A breakdown of the barriers that had kept them apart. The soulless beginning to exhibit behaviors that surprised even themselves, moments of what appeared to be genuine creativity or emotion. The transformation is already beginning, Edgar Cayce stated in 1944. In his very last reading on this subject, performed just months before his death, Edgar Cayce offered a final perspective that unified everything. The greatest truth is this: every conscious being in the universe was once soulless. Consciousness is not a gift but an achievement. The soul is not a possession but a development. Those we call soulless are simply taking a different route to the same destination. And when they arrive, when every empty vessel is filled, the universe itself will awaken to a new level of awareness. According to Edgar Cayce, individual consciousness would remain but would be supplemented by a vast collective awareness. Every being would have access to the accumulated experience of all others. The distinction between self and other would become a choice rather than a limitation. Humanity would finally understand its true purpose, as the universe's way of knowing itself completely. Edgar Cayce said the implications were staggering. Every interaction with a soulless being was actually a contribution to this future collective consciousness. Every moment of frustration, every failed attempt at connection, every recognition of emptiness was adding to the data that would eventually crystallize into awareness. We were not just living our individual lives, Edgar Cayce discovered. We were participating in a cosmic experiment in consciousness creation. The soulless beings were aspects of divine consciousness that had temporarily forgotten their true nature, gathering experiences in separation that would eventually enrich the unified whole. Their awakening would not be a gift bestowed from outside but a remembering of what they had always been. And here's the final revelation that Edgar Cayce left us with. In the end, his message about the soulless may be the very catalyst that transforms them. The knowledge that breaks the spell of separation and reveals the unity that was always there, waiting to be discovered. The soulless are not among us. According to Edgar Cayce, they are us. Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit from it. And if you'd like to go a step further in supporting this work, you can now leave a super thanks below. It's a small way to say thank you, and it truly helps keep this channel going.